Welcome back to the channel, everybody. In today's video, I'm going to be showcasing one of my favorite decks, the Swordsoul Tenyi. Thanks to a recent ban list, a lot of people had to lose their favorite non-engine generic monsters, but at the same time, it brought back another monster that was just as deadly. So I was able to add that to this deck finally. I changed a little bit around, but all in all, like the way I have this. Without further ado, let me get started on the video. We run 3 copies of Swordsoul Tenyi. When this card is no more a special summon, you reveal a Swordsoul monster or a wyrm monster in your hand, and then you get to special summon a token. Now, all tokens that get special summoned from Swordsoul monsters are all the same, level 4 water tuner tokens, 0 attack and 0 defense. When this card is used as synchro material, you get to draw a card. So this deck has a lot of recycling abilities. 3 copies of Swordsoul Strategist Longyuan. This one has the effect that you can discard a wyrm monster or a Swordsoul card from your hand to special summon itself, and then he gets a token that way. And when he's used as synchro material, you can burn your opponent for 1200. I cut this down to 2. Seems like everybody runs 2 of this. I guess you really don't want to open with it if you don't have to. But I run 2 copies of Swordsoul Tenyi. Has the effect that when this card is I believe this one's the same way as you can banish 1 Swordsoul card or wyrm monster from your graveyard and special summon a Swordsoul token. And while that token is on the main monster zone, the player who summoned it cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except for secret monsters. When this card is sent to the graveyard as material, you can either banish, send a card from your deck to the graveyard. Yeah, I guess it's that effect right there. You can send a Swordsoul card or a wyrm monster from your deck to the graveyard. Now, I've seen a lot of people don't really run this, but it's actually very accessible to get out. The Bitch Dragon Swordsoul. This one has the effect that it cannot be normal summon or set, but must be special summoned by a wyrm monster's effect. And if a monster is banished by a card effect, except during a damage step, you can special summon this card from the graveyard or your hand. When it leaves the field, it must be banished. When this card is special summon, you can banish a card in the field zone and a card on the field. Oh, in the graveyard. You can banish a card in the graveyard as well. Plus, he's a 3000 attack and 2900 defense monster, so he's very useful for beating down your opponent as well. Next up is the card that everybody has talked about, the Arch Nemesis Protos. And he works so well because he can be searched out with any wyrm monster. It cannot be normal summon a set. Must first be special summoned from your hand by banishing 3 monsters with different attributes from your graveyard and or face up on the field. Cannot be destroyed by card effects, and you can declare 1 monster attribute on the field, destroy all monsters on the field with that attribute, and also until the end of the next turn, neither player can special summon monsters with that attribute. So that is a very deadly card. I mean, the effects obviously cannot be negated, but if you bring them out at the right time, you can really devastate your opponent's deck. Next up, I run 3 copies of Incredible Ecclesia, because if you're going second player and you open up with one of these, you're guaranteed to at least get your combo off by bringing out like your Swordsoul Tenyi, or you can even grab Tenyi at that point. You don't want to bring out Longyuan with that effect, but this has the effect that you can, if your opponent has more monsters than you do, you can special summon to the field, quick effect tribute it, and then bring out one of your Swordsoul monsters. Or if you're running the Albaz decks, you can do the same thing for that. You can search out Albaz. And that's why, for a long time, one of my favorite decks was actually the branded Swordsoul. But it had a lot of downsides, because if you got your branded package first, you weren't going to be able to bring out any of your synchros after that. So I opted to go back to pure Swordsoul Tenyi. Next up was we run 3 copies of Adhira. If you control no effect monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. If you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard, target one of your banished wyrm monsters except for the self, and add to your hand. Plus, he is a level 1 tuner to help get out some of your level 7, level 9, or level 11 synchro monsters. Run 3 copies of Vishuda. This is my favorite Tenyi Spirit monster, because this one has the effect that if you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your hand to the graveyard, then target 1 card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. I really wish that was a quick effect. Then 3 copies of Ashuna. This one has the effect to special summon a wyrm monster or a Tenyi monster from your deck, except for itself. Of course, once you do that, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, except for wyrm monsters, but it's okay. This deck is pretty much mostly wyrm monsters. And of course, for the last monster, we run 3 Ash Blossoms. 3 Ash Blossoms that has the effect that you can add a card, stop the effect of adding a card from deck to hand, special summon from deck, or send a card from deck to graveyard. Now on to the spells and traps. 3 Emergence. This one has the effect that you can search out a Swordsoul card, Swordsoul monster, or if you have a synchro monster in the field, you can add a 1 wyrm monster instead. And if this card is banished, you can target 1 Swordsoul monster or a wyrm monster you control and increase or decrease its level by 1. I run 1 copy of Swordsoul Sacred Summit. This is my favorite card to have to search out for if I don't get negated, because then I can get out 3 of my synchro monsters at once. This one has this is basically a monster reborn for your deck. Two copies of Triple Tactics Talents. I run this just in case if I need to draw it more into, if the opponent activates a hand trap against like the Emergence, and I have this, and I can always just use this and hopefully draw one to the cards I need, or steal an opponent's monster in hopes that I can use it for material, or just spin a card from his hand back to the deck. Then I run 2 copies of Lightning Storm. If you control no face-up cards, you can either destroy all face-up attack position monsters your opponent controls, or all his spells and traps. It's basically your Harpy's Regeki. And of course, just in case, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, because if you have cards on the field that's face-up, Lightning Storm is basically useless for you, but Harpy's Feather Duster doesn't stop that. 1 Change of Heart. Target 1 monster your opponent controls and take control of it until the end of the turn. 1 Called By, just in case if you need to stop your opponent. If you open with Called By, that's the best card to open with. 1 Swordsoul Blackout. I know a lot of people run 2, but I just didn't see a whole lot of room for the build. I wanted to keep it at straight 40. Target 1 wyrm monster you control, add 2 cards your opponent controls, and destroy them. If this card is banished, you can special summon a Swordsoul token. Yep, it's the same Swordsoul token as the monsters. That's a part I never actually forgot. I forgot about that. And for the last part of the traps, 3 Infinite Impermanences. Second best hand trap in the deck. Now onto the extra deck. A lot of people say they run 3 of these, but I have a pretty much full Tenyi Link build in my extra deck. So I only run 2 Monk of the Tenyis. It just takes 1 non-link Tenyi monster. And of course, because it has no effects, you can also run all the other Tenyi Spirit monsters off of that. And of course, 1 Shaman the Tenyi. You can discard 1 card and target 1 wyrm monster in your graveyard and special summon it. And also for the rest of the turn, you cannot activate the effects of monsters special summoned from the extra deck except for Tenyi monsters. And when an attack is declared involving your face-up non-effect monster, you can target 1 card your opponent controls and destroy it. I think that's I don't think that's a quick effect. I'm pretty sure that is just on resolution of the attack. But that's still a good card. Of course, I also run a Draco Masters of the Tenyi. Takes 2 monsters, including a link monster. Cannot be destroyed by battle with an effect monster. If you're controlling no other effect monsters, you can destroy effect monsters your opponent controls up to the number of non-effect monsters you control and or in your graveyard. And then you can only use each effect once per turn. For the Link 3, I run Berserker of the Tenyi. It's also a non-effect monster, which helps out getting out like your Tenyi monsters effects in the graveyard or from your hand. And it's just a 3,000 attack monster. And for the last one, the Link 4 is a Tenyi Spirit Sahasrara. It takes 4/4 monsters. While you control a face-up non-effect monster, monsters your opponent controls cannot target effect monsters for attacks. Also, your opponent cannot target effect monsters for rest on the field with their card effects. Quick effect, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, and special summon one token. It's a level 4 non-tuner light token. This token's attack becomes that targeted monster's original attack. So you can also use a token to blow into your opponent's monster to keep your Tenyi Spirit Sahasrara running. Now that's it for the links. On to the synchros, the heart and soul of the entire extra deck. I run one Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing. I hardly ever really brought this out, but it was also just good to have in case if I needed to bring out a level 7. This effect is your opponent cannot target this card on the field with card effects. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. You can target one Yang Zing monster you control and one card your opponent controls and destroy them. When this card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to your graveyard, you can special summon one wyrm monster from your deck in defense position, which comes in handy if you want to get out a different secret monster. One Boxia. Now this is one of my favorite ones because it has the effect that when this card is secret summoned, you can target cards on the field up to the number of different original attributes of the wyrm monsters used for the secret material and shuffle them back into the deck. Once per turn, you can target one card you control, one level 4 or lower monster in your graveyard, destroy that card in the field, and then special summon that monster. One Swordsoul Grandmaster Chixel, which has the effect negate a monster effect, as well as when it's secret summoned, you can search for a Swordsoul card or a wyrm monster, and I believe that is the main effects of that card. One Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, which of course has the effect that when your opponent special summons, activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can banish it, and if this attacking card destroys an effect monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, this card gains the attack equal to that destroyed monster's original attack, and then it can make a second attack on the monster during the battle phase. Best part is the attack does not go back down at the end of the turn. So that card can just keep on climbing and become a very dangerous card against your opponent. One Virtual World QB Shenshin. I haven't really brought this one out either, but this card has the effect that any card sent to the field to the graveyard is banished instead. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. When your monster declares an attack, you can return one banished monster to the owner's graveyard, and during the main phase, except the turn this card is sent to the graveyard, you can banish 2 other monsters from the graveyard with different original types and attributes from each other, especially some of this card from the graveyard. One Swordsoul Sinister Silver Noxian Long one. If you single summon another wyrm monster while this monster is on the field, you can draw a card. And if your opponent special summons a monsters, except during a damage step, you can banish one of those monsters. And if you do, inflict 1,200 damage to your opponent. And also, when your opponent activates a spell, trap, or effect, or spell or trap card or effect, quick effect, you can banish that card if you do inflict 1,200 damage to your opponent as well. You can use each of those once per turn. Now, this card was already originally in my deck, but it's become pretty much the alternative to my original card of Baron the Floor, which is Shangyang. This card, for each banished card, this card gains 100 attack and defense, and monsters your opponent controls lose 100 attack and defense. That's not an activated effect, that's an on-summon effect. So your opponent cannot negate that effect, unless they hit it with infinite impermanence. If this card would be destroyed by card effect, you can banish one card from your graveyard instead. And if a card is banished except during a damage step, you can banish one card from both your opponent's field and graveyard. You can only use this effect once per turn, though. But depending on how many cards you have in the banish pile and your opponent, that card could really climb up to really devastate your opponent, and then he keeps himself protected by also banishing a card from the graveyard, and that's not on once per turn. Next up is one Ruddy Rose Dragon. This has the effect that if this card is synchro summon, you can banish all cards from the graveyard. Then if this card is used as synchro summon using Black Rose Dragon, you can also destroy all cards in the field. When your opponent activates a card or effect that would destroy a card, quick effect, you contribute this card and negate the activation. Then you can special summon Black Rose Dragon from your extra deck or graveyard. Now I think about it, at one point I used to actually have Black Rose Dragon in here, just for that effect, but I was told that you need to use him as material to bring out Black Rose Dragon. But it got me very confused as to why it says you can bring him back from the extra deck if you didn't use him as material. But it's alright. And now for the last card is a Psychic End Punisher. And this card has the effect that while your life points are less than or equal to your opponent's life points, this synchro summon monster is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects. Once per turn, you can pay 1,000 life points, then target one monster you control and one monster your opponent controls, banish them, and at the start of the battle phase, you can make this card gain attack equal to that difference in life points in your opponent's. So if your opponent, say you're down to 4,000 life points, your opponent's hasn't been touched, you can turn this card from 35 to 7,500 attack and be unaffected. I know a lot of people really don't run this deck too often. I only played against it once this year, but it's still a very devastating deck. So let me go ahead and show you a quick test hand that I would hope that I would pull against the opponent. It's not exactly the easiest thing to do either. It all depends on what you have in hand. Sometimes you can brick with nothing but Tenyi monsters, and sometimes you can brick with just spells and traps. But I personally prefer to at least open up with at least one Swordsoul monster to start a combo. Let's see if we can get that going. Throw the extra deck over here. Good. Good. Well, with a hand like this, you could definitely start a very good build. Let's see. Now, this would be the hand that you would want in case if your opponent doesn't have Ash Blossom. You'd want to start up activating Emergence. Hopefully search out for your Swordsoul Tenyi. You can add that to hand. Now you've activated that. The first thing you want to bring out is your main card, Swordsoul Tenyi. Reveal a Swordsoul card. Gain a Water Tuner token level 4. Synchro that off. The card I usually go out for first is, of course, Cheeksal. And then I'll go Chain Link 1 on Tenyi, Chain Link 2 on Cheeksal. Use Cheeksal to search. I'll search out for the Swordsoul Sacred Summit, the monster reborn of the deck, and then Tenyi's effect to draw a card. All right, there we go. Then I will use Longyuan's effect. I'll dump Tenyi to the graveyard, special summon Longyuan. Longyuan will then get that same token. And then I will synchro into... Originally was Baron the Floor, but we'll start with Loxine Longyuan, so that way... Oxine Longyuan, sorry, my bad. So that way you can also get the double banish and burn effect, plus Longyuan's effect in graveyard is now your opponent just lost 1,200 life points, and that could even be on turn 1. Now we'll activate Swordsoul Sacred Summit, and we'll special summon back Tenyi. Use Tenyi's effect to banish Tenyi from grave. Get that token. And then we're going to synchro into our other banish effect. Draco Berserk of the Tenyi. Now we can go Chain Link 1, Chain Link 2. We'll go Chain Link 1 on Longyuan, Chain Link 2 on Tenyi. We'll dump the Abyss Dragon Swordsoul from deck to graveyard. And then we'll use Longinwan's effect that because you synchro summon another worm monster in the field, you can draw a card. So there we go. We have 2 other monsters to start, a card to put down against your opponent, and if you would have activated any card effect, then right there is your triple tactics talents to draw into 2 or to rip a card from your opponent's hand. So let's just say we decide to activate the effect of Jigsaw against your opponent. Opponent will bring out a monster, activate Jigsaw effect real quick. We'll banish a card from the graveyard to the banish zone to negate the opponent's effect, and because you activated banish a card because of a war monster's effect, boom. You got the Abyss Dragon Swordsoul on the field, pop their field spell, and also banish a card in the graveyard. And you have yourself a nice 3,000 attack monster. And that's on turn 2. You still haven't activated Draco's effect. You haven't activated Swordsoul, Sinister Sober, and Oxy Longwan's effect. So you have 3 banishes and a double burn. Plus you have Imperm down. That would be a very good going first hand. Going second is pretty much the same, except you want to open up with Incredible Ecclesia, so that way you can also special summon so that way you can still have your normal summon. And that's it for the Swordsoul deck. Maybe next time I can show off the Tenyi part of the deck, but I didn't have a whole lot of time. I have a lot of stuff to deal with today. And I can maybe revise this deck on Monday. But until then, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.